This is historian Stephen Ujifusa, and this is the Wet Lunch on the High Seas podcast. I'd like to shift a little bit into sports history. And this past June, the United States cricket team did an absolute upset of the typical order of things when they defeated Pakistan's team in the T20 Cricket World Cup Championships. And we often think of cricket as being an English phenomenon. It also spread to the former colonies in the Caribbean and to South Asia, where it is still an extremely popular sport. But there was a period in the mid-19th century where cricket was a big-time sport. Cricket obviously is the ancestor of American baseball, but a group of immigrants from England came to cities such as New York and Philadelphia and brought the sport of cricket with them to America. And it especially became popular in Philadelphia. Philadelphia had a large textile-based economy. You had lots of textile mills on rivers such as the Schuylkill or the East Falls section, and also in the Wissahickon Creek in northwest Philadelphia. And these immigrant English workers brought with them their skills from the looms of the Midlands. In fact, it was textile mechanization that was invented in England by Richard Arkwright, and this technology was actually pirated by many American industrialists and brought over to the United States, first to Rhode Island and later to Philadelphia. So these immigrants, in their rare bits of time off, would play this game. It was seen as a working class game. People betted on it, and a group of wealthy Philadelphians, most notably William Roch Wister, who was a prominent landowner and society figure in the mid-19th century, he thought this was quite a wonderful game, and he decided to give it a gloss of upper-class civility. And in mid-1850s, he founded two cricket clubs that still exist to this day. One is the Philadelphia Cricket Club, located in the Chestnut Hill section of Philadelphia. And then in 1854, he founded the Germantown Cricket Club, which still exists in the Germantown section of Philadelphia. And by the late 19th century, cricket became a very, very popular pastime for all levels of society. There's a photograph that still exists in the clubhouse of the Germantown Cricket Club, and it shows a match in 1891. The clubhouse had just been completed, and it was designed by the famed firm of McKim, Mead and White, an architectural partnership in New York. It was built in the Neo-Georgian style. It looks extremely English, extremely proper. And the photograph shows a game of cricket being played with the team of Philadelphia, the Gentlemen of Philadelphia, their 11s team, playing against a team from England. There is a grandstand one end of the pitch, and the clubhouse is at the other. And you see hundreds of well-dressed spectators in the Germantown Cricket Club grounds watching this game. The clubhouse is surrounded by a big stone wall, and below the stone wall are dozens of ordinary spectators, middle and working class residents of the Germantown section of Philadelphia, coming to watch and listen the game. There are a lot of them who are seated or standing at the base of the wall. They can't see a thing. Some have climbed up to the top of the wall. Also pictured in the photograph is one penny farthing bike that is propped up against the side of the stone wall. And the crucial issue with cricket was that matches could last up to 5 days. And by the Gilded Age in America, and especially in Philadelphia, time was becoming more and more of a luxury. And baseball eventually supplanted cricket as a popular sport in the northeastern United States and later the rest of the country. Philadelphia has a big place in Major League Baseball history. It was the hometown of Connie Mack, who lived in the Germantown Mount Airy section of Philadelphia, who was the manager of the Philadelphia Athletics for its first 50 seasons. The cricket creases at the Philadelphia Cricket Club in Chestnut Hill, Germantown Cricket Club, and their sister club, the Merion Cricket Club in Haverford, Pennsylvania. By the 1920s, they gave way to lawn tennis courts. It just became a much more popular and also time-efficient pastime for Philadelphia's elite. Philadelphia became known as a tennis city producing in the 1920s through the 1950s tennis greats such as the recently deceased Victor Seixas Jr. and also the famous or probably infamous Wimbledon champion Bill Tilden. Regarding cricket, there's a wonderful story about it, probably taking place in the 1930s or so, that's recounted by the famed BBC cricket announcer Henry Blofeld about Groucho Marx's visit to Lord's Cricket Ground in London, where he's a guest of a group of English aristocrats. And after an hour or so of the cricket match, one of these British gentlemen turns to the famed Jewish American comedian and asks him what he thinks of the game. And Groucho Marx famously replies, "It's great. When does it start?" Recently, in the past 30 years or so, there's been a revival of cricket in the United States. And it began at first at the three cricket clubs in Philadelphia, Germantown, Merion, and Philadelphia. And the recent victory by the U.S. team in the World's Cup of Cricket is a wonderful tribute to the work that has gone into this revival of the sport. Now, going back a bit to the Golden Age of Philadelphia cricket during the Gilded Age, there was a marked divide between professional players and amateur players. In America, in around the year 1900, cricket players were gentlemen amateurs, men who had the time and the money to devote to the sport. In England, however, during this time, a number of cricketers who got very good became professionals, and this was seen as a huge divide within the sports world. Those who wondered whether or not it was, in fact, a ethical thing for men to play sports for money. This also applied to the rowing world, most famously in the case of the rower John B. Kelly Jr., who was a member of the Vesper Boat Club of Philadelphia, and he tried to enter the Diamond Sculls Regatta at Henley, and there was controversy about whether or not his club was one made up of gentlemen. He himself was a bricklayer. He had started off as a bricklayer and later became a very successful contractor. He, in fact, got his revenge because he ended up becoming the father of Grace Kelly, later Princess Grace of Monaco. But he was denied entry because of his boat club's association with working men, and he carried this grudge throughout his entire life. Another Philadelphia athlete who felt kind of snubbed by this divide between gentleman and amateur was the Philadelphia cricketer Bart King, and he himself blurred the line between professional and amateur, and in order to get status, he needed some help from some wealthy friends. Bart King was a member of a cricket club called the Belmont Cricket Club. It was not one of the quote-unquote big three cricket clubs. It was located in the West Philadelphia neighborhood of Philadelphia, and it was catered more to a middle and upper middle class clientele. It was located at the intersection of South 50th Street and Chester Avenue. West Philadelphia during the Gilded Age was a very prosperous area. It was not like Chestnut Hill or the Main Line, but it was the home of middle and upper middle class professionals, and it was wealthy enough to support the Belmont Cricket Club. It was a beautiful building with an expansive and beautiful set of grounds located right next to the 49th Street train stop. And Bart King was someone who still had to work for a living. And I'd like to go into a little bit about his story. This is from a piece I wrote for phillyhistory.org that I called Say Hello to Bart King, the Kingsessing Cricketer, that was published in June 2014. Kingsessing was the name of the neighborhood from which Bart King came from, and gives a little slice of Philadelphia sporting history and about someone who tried his best to balance the tightrope between gentleman and amateur during the early 1900s in the city of Philadelphia. A slice of England in West Philadelphia, there once was a Sherwood Forest, a grove of trees that stood at the intersection of 58th Street and Baltimore Avenue. Nearby was the Belmont Cricket Club at the intersection of South 50th Street and Chester Avenue, which for a few short years competed against the still extant Germantown, Merion, and Philadelphia clubs. On hot, hazy summer afternoons in the 1890s, the residents of the surrounding brick twin houses porches bedecked with striped awnings, would stroll to Belmont Cricket and watch the local and international legend Bart King, who lived from 1873 to 1965, play on the crease. At the turn of the 20th century, the gentlemen of Philadelphia were a juggernaut that mowed down the best teams from England and her colonies. The Associated Clubs of Philadelphia proudly declared that with the vast improvement made in cricket at Philadelphia, and in fact everywhere in the country since the last team visited England, there is every reason to expect very different showings this year. Since the last time crossing the Atlantic, the representatives of the Quaker City have laid claim to more than ordinary honors. In 1891, Lord Hawke's team suffered a defeat at their hands. Incidentally, that was the match shown in the photograph I described earlier of the Germantown Cricket Club. The first year, the gentlemen of Ireland had to lower their colors when they met the Philadelphians. In 1893, the Australian team of that year lost in Philadelphia. In 1894, Lord Hawke's team was again beaten. The visiting Cambridge and Oxford teams lost to home players in 1895. Leading the charge during cricket's brief golden age was Bart King. A star bowler and hitter, King would later be known as the Bob Hope of the cricketing world. According to one account, he told his impossible tales with such an air of conviction that his audiences were always in doubt when to take him seriously. He made their task doubly difficult by sprinkling in a fair mixture of truth and fiction. When King died in 1965, his obituary noted that his 344 for Belmont versus Merion B stands as the North American record. He scored 39 centuries in his career, and he topped 1,000 runs in a season 6 times, in 4 of them also taking over 100 wickets. In those days, watching a cricket match was just as popular a pastime as going to a Phillies game. West Philadelphia's Belmont was the scrappy sibling of Philadelphia's League. The haughty Pennsylvania Railroad built the main line in Chestnut Hill, while Peter Widener's humbler trolley lines built the more democratic suburbs of West Philadelphia. The Belmont Club, founded in 1874, was prosperous, its grounds and buildings beautiful, but it did not put on aristocratic airs. Neither did Bart King. What John B. Kelly Jr. was to rowing, King was to the even more rarefied world of cricket. Unlike most of his peers, the middle-class King had to work for a living. In those days, a Philadelphia cricketer did not play for money. To support his amateur habit, King worked in his father's linen business. There were many textile mills in West Philadelphia at this time, which drew their power from Cobb's Creek. To preserve his status as gentleman amateur, wealthy friends secured him a low-stress job at a Philadelphia insurance company. By the early 1900s, America lagged behind England when it came to compensating its best players. In fact, King was surprised to learn that British cricketers actually got paid for their sport. "Hello, Mr. King," said an English professional who ran into King in London. "Hello, call me Bart," King responded. "But you're a gentleman cricketer, sir," the professional queried. "Aren't you a gentleman too?" King asked. "Oh, no, sir, I'm a professional," was the reply. Despite its upper-class associations, cricket in America had proletarian origins. English textile workers from Nottingham brought the game to America in the early 19th century and played 6-hour matches with gusto on their precious days off. Spectators drank ale and freely placed bets. Many cricketers also tried their hand at baseball, too, a faster American variant of the game, also with runs and innings, which gained traction during the Civil War. By the 1880s, the well-heeled Whisters of Germantown and the Clarks of West Philadelphia, developers of the Spruce Hill neighborhood, took up the British sport and transformed the game of the millworkers into a pastime of the wealthy. The local blue-collar cricket clubs such as Tioga, which King played for as a young man, and Frankford closed their doors, their creases and clubhouses replaced by blocks of row houses. Belmont held out longer but succumbed on the eve of World War I. The surrounding neighborhood was populated by comfortable factory managers and small business owners, like King's family, who could not afford to be gentlemen amateurs or attend games that lasted 3 to 5 days. More importantly, the rise of professional baseball teams, with their big stadiums and open seating, such as Shibe Park at 21st and Lehigh, later known as Connie Mack Field, were a more democratic way to spend an afternoon for the industrial city's growing population. Philadelphia formed its first official baseball team in 1883. Soon, the Phillies attracted bigger crowds. Spectators could cheer from the stadium bleachers while their favorite players scored runs, rather than demurely clap their hands behind ropes at private clubs. The rules of baseball were also much less arcane, and the seventh inning stretch replaced leisurely breaks for lunch and tea. Belmont Cricket Club closed its doors in 1914, but not before visiting English cricketer C. Percy Herditch introduced its members to a more fast-paced field sport, soccer. King saw which way the wind was blowing in West Philadelphia and joined the Philadelphia Cricket Club in Chestnut Hill 2 years before Belmont went defunct. He continued to play and tour internationally until his death at age 92. The London Times eulogized, "Had he been an Englishman or an Australian, he would have been even more famous than he was." The Belmont Cricket Club was torn down in 1918 and was replaced by the fields and buildings of the Kingsessing Recreation Center, which continues to serve the neighborhood's athletic needs to this day. Thank you so much for listening to this brief history of cricket in America and in Philadelphia. This is historian Stephen Ujifusa, and this is the Wet Lunch on the High Seas podcast.